Well, since my initiative is sort of wrapping up, I thought when I read the description of the Worldview framework, I thought it would be a really effective model to use to reflect back on my experience. And the words that kind of stood out to me were the fact that we're living in a world that's increasingly complex and we increasingly face conflict. And this past year has taught me a lot about facing conflict and what that looks like for me. And so I thought, yeah, it would be really helpful to maybe gain some tools and some insight on how to do that more effectively in the future. The notion of being curious and being welcoming, and that if we have opposing worldviews with someone else, that doesn't make one of us right or wrong. That's, I guess, something that's kind of been floating around in my head, but to have that articulated, I think it opens up so many doors for more like healthy, heart-centered dialogue. So really appreciate that framework and language, and also really appreciated the opportunity to dive into systems thinking when looking at social systems and their worldview. So especially looking back on my experience retrospectively, being able to, reflect on how my social systems worldview has influenced my experience has been really helpful, and really helpful for me to kind of take my responsibility out of it a little bit, and that what's happening really is so much bigger than me as one person having an influence. So diving into that complexity. So those are the two things that are standing out to me right now. I always come into these sorts of things without expectations. So I don't want to say that it surprised me that it's totally exceeded my expectations, but I will say that, like, being a young person coming into these workshops and spaces, sometimes your knowledge isn't as valued, or you feel kind of excluded, but the really safe and welcome space that you and Jerry have facilitated and that our group has created together has been very pleasantly surprising for me, that I felt so welcome despite being young and with less work experience in my field and those sorts of things. So I would love to bring in some of this worldview analysis and systems thinking stuff into my report that I can pass on to the organization that I've worked with and to my funders. And also, we'll definitely use the framework in future facilitating, hosting type opportunities, especially when times of tension and conflict arise. So I've said this a couple of times, but really believe that that some of the questions that people have asked and some of the ways of thinking about situations and conflicts, I just see those being so transferable to all kinds of different situations. So I'm confident that in whatever career path I decide, because I plan on choosing something that's not necessarily easy, I am confident that I'll use it all the time. I think the Worldview framework has so many applications, both within our own personal lives and our organizations, our social systems. So it's not, it doesn't restrict people. It doesn't restrict based on what your experience has been or how old you are or anything else. So I would say that if you're questioning whether it will be relevant, it is relevant to so many different situations.